Hello, we have with us today Dr. Dan Chuftan. Dr. Chuftan is the head of the National Security Program at the Haifa University in Israel. Welcome to SNI, Dr. Chuftan. I want to begin by asking you about this lecture that you gave on the hopelessness of the Arab state. You painted a very bleak picture of the Arab state. Why do you think that there is no future for the Arab state?
Well, first of all, I think Arabs themselves are very disheartened by the situation. And for the first time in a very long period, they recognize the structural weaknesses of the Arab world. Namely, it's not just a crisis, it goes far beyond it. There was a great hope that things can change positively in the Arab world once they change regimes, because the very simple-minded approach was it's nothing wrong with the culture, nothing wrong with the society, it's only the dictator regimes that you have in the Arab world, and once you change them, then things will be better. And then we had what was called the Arab Spring, and the result is even worse than before. In other words, the society is the problem rather than just the leadership. Is the leadership very encouraging, very good? No, certainly not. But the society is even worse. Let me give an extreme example. In Libya, you had a ruler who was not just a dictator and a bloodthirsty dictator, he was also crazy. In other words, you can't imagine somebody worse as the leader of Libya. And now they killed him and he was replaced, and things in Libya are much worse than they were even under Gaddafi, because the society could not represent a substitute that was democratic or even less autocratic than Gaddafi. Look at what happened in Syria. You have a terrible dictator. He kills more than 500,000 of his people, displaces millions of people, causes enormous suffering. Who's coming back? He's coming back. Now, is it true that this was done with Iranian help and Russian help? Yes, but do you have forces in Syria, in Egypt, in other Arab states who are strong enough to take over, who have enough public support to take over, that are democratic or open-minded or less oppressive? No. The alternative in Egypt is between a military dictator and the Muslim Brothers. The Muslim Brothers are much worse than Sisi. I think in terms of what Egypt can deliver today, Sisi is a good option, but it's only good compared to the catastrophe of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the problem in the Arab world is not with the regimes, it is with the society. The society is not pluralistic. They have done very little in the last 100 years to build nation, to build a society. They are unfit to deal with the realities of the 21st century. I doubt if they are capable of dealing with the challenges of the 20th century. And Arabs recognize it today. That's the change. The change is not that things are bad. The change is that Arab leaderships, Arab elites, Arab societies today recognize that they have a structural problem, and for the foreseeable future, no hope.
But isn't part of the problem also because of the repressive regimes that many of the countries in the Middle East have had? So the society has not been really able to evolve and perhaps to speak up.
But why do they keep repressive regimes? We had other parts of the world that used to have repressive regimes and now don't have repressive regimes. I don't know. Look at Singapore. It came out of exactly the same background of colonial rule as Arabs did. In the beginning, the regime that they had there was not really fully democratic, and look at what they've achieved.
But wasn't Lee Kuan Yew almost a dictator?
In the beginning, yes, but look at what he achieved. So this excuse, you see, you either want to make things better or you want to have excellent excuses. You either want to succeed or you want to have a good excuse for failure. Arabs have very good excuses for failure. colonialism. Okay, Arabs had for 30 years colonialism light. How long did India have colonialism? Okay, and look what India has achieved, and look what the Arabs have not achieved. This is exactly what I tried to say in the beginning, that we have tested this because the old regimes were kicked out by the people about a decade ago, less than a decade ago. What substituted it? What substituted these regimes? The society was unable to come up with a democratic alternative. It was unable to come up with a constructive alternative.
Well, there was the Arab Spring, and it raised a lot of hopes in the world that the Arab world would see significant changes and transformations. Do you think that spring has not really led to these expected changes?
It's not what I think. Ask the Arabs about it. Things now are worse than they were in the beginning of the Arab Spring. I must admit that in the very beginning, I immediately saw that it is leading nowhere. I remember meeting the people in Egypt who came out in the Tahrir Square, and I said to them, you're the best thing that can happen to Egypt, and I'm delighted you came out with it, but your chances are zero. Your chances are those of a snowball in hell. You can't succeed. You can bring 200,000 Egyptians to the Tahrir Square, but 90 million Egyptians are waiting to hear what Qaradawi says, what the Sheikh of the most radical approach in the Arab world that is so popular not only in Egypt but throughout the Arab world, what he says. So unfortunately, the problem is deeper than just regimes. By the way, if you want a good example where the only problem is the regime, it is Iran. In Iran, you have a very impressive people. In Iran, you have a very impressive culture. I'm sure Iran one day, when it gets rid of the barbaric regime that they have today, Iran will be a pillar of stability, of success in the Middle East, because the Iranian society is very, very impressive. Even under this barbaric regime, you have elements of pluralism. In Iran, you have success in many fields, scientific, what have you. The Iranian society can adjust to the 21st century. The only thing blocking it is the barbaric regime that you have today. Unfortunately, in the Arab world, it goes much deeper.
What about the US policies towards Iran? You've spoken about a barbaric regime, but at the same time, there have been questions raised about US policies towards Iran, especially the Trump administration's withdrawal from the nuclear treaty, and how they continue to press on, they've now pressed sanctions on the Iranian regime.
I think that what Trump did was exactly the right thing. And Obama, I think, could have brought us to a catastrophic situation, because the deal that you had with Iran was one that gave the Iranians exactly what they wanted. You see, the Obama administration waited until Iran got 100% what it wanted on enrichment, and then they needed 10 years quiet without outside pressure for weaponization and for ballistic delivery systems. And that's exactly what they've got. The Iranian concept was, in 10 years we will have a nuclear arsenal, not just a bomb. A nuclear arsenal with delivery systems, we become a nuclear power. And Obama gave them exactly what they wanted. So I think it was critical to go back on this deal. And now I think that what Trump is doing, first of all, he recognizes Iran to be an enemy, the number one enemy of the United States in the region, and also the number one enemy of most Arab states. Because with the exception of Syria, if you look particularly to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, to Jordan, to many other Arab states, they consider Iran to be a very major problem. The weaker the Arab states are, and since Iran is relatively strong, Iran is trying to hegemonize the Middle East, and it is sending its forces, its proxies to be more exact, to Yemen, to Bab el-Mandeb, to Syria, to Iraq, and they are undermining practically every Arab regime in order to take over the Arab world. and the result would have been catastrophic, not just to the Middle East, but in a far greater scope. If you look at the global impact of what would have happened if the United States would have continued with the Obama policy, the result would have been 100% Iran as a nuclear power, and the result would have been that nobody trusts the United States anymore from preventing proliferation of nuclear weapons. And then countries like Argentina, like Brazil, like Sweden, like Japan must go nuclear. And before you know it, 30, 40 countries around the world, including radical countries, have nuclear programs, and it is not to be stopped anymore because you can't trust the United States.
Yeah, but you said that, you implied that President Obama gave the deal to Iran on a platter and they got 100% what they wanted. But this deal also had the backing of several European countries, and they have not pulled out of the deal.
Yes, but the Europeans have no ability to have a different position when the United States is abdicating its leadership, and this is exactly what Obama did. He abdicated the position of the United States as leader of the free world. Second, the Europeans are known to buy their immediate short-term tranquility at the expense of the next generations. This is what they always do. This is what they do concerning their own defense. They're not spending in order to be able to defend themselves in Europe. They spend 1%, about 1% of their GDP. The United States alone spends more than twice what all Europe spends on defense. The Europeans don't defend themselves. They expect the Americans to save them. As the Americans saved them in the Second World War and in the Cold War, they expect Americans to fight for them. The Europeans are irresponsible about practically everything, and they're irresponsible about that. By the way, now they're not only irresponsible, they're also ridiculous, because they are trying to work with Iran against the United States, which is ridiculous because the main European firms tell their government, I will not be with you, I will not alienate the United States, I'm not willing to accept American sanctions on me. So if you look at Volkswagen, if you look at Ani, if you look at the major oil companies, technological companies, Airbus companies, they're all not working with the Europeans. The Europeans have made themselves irrelevant and ridiculous by trying to play against the United States with the most important regional enemy of the United States.
Well, India also remains a friend of Iran.
India remains dependent on some Iranian oil supplies. The United States has reached an agreement with India concerning a gradual withdrawal from
energy
gradual
supplies.
reduction. If the Europeans would have reached the same agreement with the United States, they would have been smarter. If the Europeans would be as smart as the Indians, I think they would be in a much better position. They don't like Trump for many, many other things, and they think they can confront him, but they can't. Europe is not really a global power. It pretends to be a global power on paper. It's a global power, but it's only a paper global power because, first of all, there is no Europe. These 28 and very soon 27 do not work as a power. They're incapable of presenting a united position. When it comes to this kind of confrontation, they're not even equipped.
Okay, you've also spoken about instability in the Middle East, and in this regard, I wanted to ask you: does this continuing instability in Middle Eastern nations also contribute to terrorism, to the rise of outfits like ISIS?
Of course. Look, you have societies that don't see any hope. You have societies that are not willing to do something so that they will have hope. In order to have some hope, you must adjust yourself to the challenges of the 21st century. For instance, you cannot rely primarily on agriculture when there is a major water crisis.
Yeah.
And people are leaving their fields and they're going into cities, and the cities are not industrialized. So it's not like the Industrial Revolution where you had a frictional problem for a while, but after a while they become industrialized societies. You cannot have anything in this modern age without science. You don't have any innovation in science in the Arab world. Between the Atlantic Ocean and the Persian Gulf, the Arab world in terms of innovation is almost brain dead. And you cannot have any science and any innovation without pluralism, and you cannot have pluralism when you treat women the way they treat in the Arab world, when you don't have any political pluralism. You also cannot have innovative universities, you cannot have innovative science, you cannot fit into the 21st century. And if you can't, if you don't have any future of success because you're not willing to work for success, the result is that radicals get a very good support, a very strong support from their societies.
Yes. But these things cannot be changed overnight. I'm sure you would agree on that.
Yes, so let's
because
start.
They have their own cultural, religious reasons for all these
Yes, but you see,
things.
India has its caste system, and it doesn't say because we have our caste system, we cannot develop a democracy. You have a democracy in spite of the caste system.
Okay.
So, will it take a long time to change? Yes. Can you achieve it if you don't start it? No. Have you started it? Not really.
Okay, one final question, and this is to do, of course, with Palestine. Now, where is the future for Israel and Palestine? Do you see them ever reaching any kind of resolution on a state of Palestine as demanded by the Palestinians?
If the Palestinians want a resolution, they could have had it in 1937, they could have had it in 1947, they could have had it in Camp David in 2000, they could have had it with Olmert in 2008. But what they're saying is, we insist on the right of return, which means let us destroy Israel, and they're not willing to give it up, and I don't think they want to stay.
Okay, on that note, we'll come to the end of this interview, and I hope that at some point of time, Israel and Palestine are able to resolve their differences.
Okay. And
Thank
if
you so
not,
much for being with us.
Very good, thank you.